and then bring in an opportunity for some discussion about the subject. And I recognize that not everybody was here when I did the first talk on this, so I think it's important to do just a little bit of recap. So there's this saying in Uji. It's, first of all, I have to say, we have to be careful when we just take one excerpt from a fascicle of Dogen and say anything conclusive about it. We have to look at the whole thing in context. So I put this out there with reservation about any conclusions. But here's one of the statements I found really helpful, and thanks to Shinkyu here for pointing it out. The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. Get your mind wrapped around it, right? The way the self arrays itself is the form of the entire world. And last time I made the point of connecting this particular statement. Now, I don't think Dogen was intending this, but I made the intention of connecting what he says here with this idea of an expanding universe, that the universe is expanding, that there's this thing called cosmogenesis. Right? That the universe, cosmogenesis, what is it? The universe is not a place necessarily. It's not the backdrop of our existence. It's not a stage on which we perform our life. That's the usual way of thinking about the universe. It's like this backdrop, it's a stage. We get up on stage from our birth, we do something on the stage, we do our particular performance called our life, and then we die, we get removed from the stage. That's a general understanding of the universe. That's our general assumption. I want to say for most of us, that's our general assumption of how we see the universe in relation to our own lives. But cosmogenesis is different. It's saying that it's not this, there wasn't this point at the beginning where the universe was created and now we're here, but rather that the universe is ongoing creativity even now. So one way to say this is that there's a direct link between the Big Bang happening then and in the present moment. Right? So I want to explore that a little deeper here, but Uji says, each moment, Uji, what is Uji? U means being, Ji, time. So Dogen puts these two things that we tend to separate out. He makes it clear that these are not two. Right? Uji, U is being, right? The physicalness of our existence, and time, Uji. And he says, each moment is all being, right? So then again, he's putting together time and being, or matter. Right? Each moment is all being. Each moment is the entire world. Right? So I don't know about you, but when I read that, I feel this kind of collapse of my understanding of who I am. And he says further, reflect now whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. We tend to have a very narrow view of this moment right now. And our senses can only go so far in understanding the present moment. We even collapse it down to, I don't know, maybe the word collapse isn't right here, but we tend to, particularly in meditation, it's what I'm feeling in my body, the physical sensations, it's my breathing. That's certainly part of the present moment, but that's a very collapsed understanding, a narrow view of the present moment. And our job in meditation is really to expand our sense of self beyond the physical sensations, beyond the breath, beyond the mental activity that we associate often with letting go of as part of meditation practice. That's just a small aspect of self, according to Dogen. Okay, so this is just a recap, an attempt at a recap. Let's go on to the next part of this fascicle. So this is going to just dig a little bit deeper into ideas of cosmogenesis and how they intersect with Uji. And keeping in mind that Dogen had no concept of cosmogenesis when he was in his time. I mean, we didn't know what we know now in terms of a universe that is expanding outward from a single point. We didn't know that. There's no way he could have known that. But yet, his way of thinking is in many ways very much in alignment with that kind of process, that the universe as an unfolding. So for us, one of our illnesses is that we tend to separate, or we view the past as separate from the present. All right? If I can say that, let me say that again. We view the past as separate from the present. And we can see that when we hear statements like the present is all there is. It's as though the past doesn't even count. Whatever happened in the past is the past, we say. That was then, this is now. Right? We have all these statements in our culture that really tend to be dismissive of the past. And I'm not saying that we should but here's the problem. Our past actions burden us, and when we consider the past, we largely have unresolved issues or traumas that are based in the past. Dogen's not talking about the past in that way, though. Right? Our problem with the past is often that we have our own issues, personal issues that come up that bind us. Or we have some degree of trauma that's located in the past, either personal trauma or collective trauma. And that burdens us, and so we do what we do with pain. We want to run away from it. We want to distance ourselves from it in some way. And we do that with the past too. We don't want to look at it, and we tend to cut it off. It's, okay, well, this is the present. That was the past. Can't we get over that? Just get over it, right? We're living in the present now. Live in the now, man. All right. So, but Dogen is coming from a different place. He's not coming from a place of past trauma, I don't think. Although you could make an argument for that, but I don't think he's coming from a place of trauma. He's coming from a place of liberation, healed from his own past trauma. So one of the ways I'm suggesting that we heal from our collective past trauma is by an understanding of what the Buddha called the right view. And right view also could be thought of in terms of cosmogenesis. So let me say a little bit more. Dogen says, it's like having crossed over mountains and rivers. Even though they still exist, I have always passed them, and now I'm residing elsewhere. He doesn't say, let me read the full text here. All right. An ordinary person, he says, who does not understand Buddha Dharma may hear the words, the time being, this way. Right? And here's what he says. It is like having crossed over rivers and climbed mountains. Even though the mountains and rivers still exist, I have already passed them and now reside in a jewel palace. Right? So this is a kind of statement of separation from the past. I did that. I had that experience back then. That was then. This is now. Now I live elsewhere. Right? But Dogen says it's not that simple. Right? How do we perceive the past? At the time the mountains were climbed and the rivers crossed, you were present. Time is not separate from you, and as you are present, time does not go away. As time is not marked by coming and going, the moments you climb the mountains is the time being right now. Right? What happened in the past is the time being right now. If time keeps coming and going, you are the time being right now. This is the meaning of the time being. Right? He says time flows. There's this quality of time. It flows. Today flows into tomorrow. Right? And the Buddha said this too. Our actions, he says, thoughts produce the world. Where does the created world come from? Where does the created world come from? It's a good question to ask today because we often assume it came from back then. But Buddha taught the created world comes from our thoughts, from our mind. Our mind creates the world. Our mind of today creates tomorrow. And if you want to know what your future holds, look at the present moment and see how your actions are, your thoughts are, your words are. That creates the world of tomorrow. Today flows in tomorrow. Today flows into yesterday. Today flows into yesterday. Yesterday flows into today. So that makes sense. To say that yesterday flows into today seems to make sense, right? Because we tend to think linearly. That there's this progression of yesterday, today, tomorrow, in a line like that. But he says, today flows into yesterday. The present affects the past. What we do now affects the past. We can change the past in the present. Today flows into today. Today flows into today. Tomorrow flows into tomorrow. Right? So he's just really playing with our sense of assumptions about time. And I want to suggest that here, Cosmogenesis also can help us get a different sense of time as we know it. Let's think about this a little bit more. This concept of cosmogenesis. So if we take, this is what happened 100 years ago, 1924, Edwin Hubble. You guys heard of the Hubble telescope, right? We didn't know 100 years ago if there was just one galaxy. And Hubble looks through this most powerful telescope, finds out there's trillions of them. Right? That's a pretty mind-blowing realization for our culture. And not only does he see that there's trillions of galaxies, he also sees that they're expanding away from each other. And then a deduction is made that if they are expanding away from each other in time, they must have come from a common point. This is this idea of the Big Bang. So if you go back in time, the whole universe kind of takes, it's like a massive inflation of everything, and it comes back to a singularity, right? And then, so then going forward from that singularity, you have an expansion. And other scientists, I think it was Stephen Hawking, he says well, what if we played around with these equations to determine, to look at the expansion rate, right? Because scientists up to that point had determined that the universe is expanding at a particular rate. There's this particular speed. Now here, this connects with our discussion about time, speed and time. There's a speed at which the universe is expanding. And he suggested that what happens if we change the equations just a little bit so that the speed was a little bit faster or a little bit slower, just less than 10 to the minus 20 or something. Anyways, if we just speed it up a fraction, if we just speed up the universe in these equations, if we just speed things up just a little bit. So in other words, if the universe were to expand just a tiny fraction of a second faster or slower than it presently goes, the universe would collapse. It wouldn't exist in the way that it does today. It would not have formed the galaxies. It would not have formed the stars. It would not have formed our bodies. Life would not have come about if the universe had expanded faster, just by a hair, or slower. And this brings us to a place of the deeper understanding of the middle way. Many of you understand the middle way, as I understand it too, as this place between extremes. The extremes of asceticism on one hand and indulgence on the other hand. The Buddha talked about that, and that was his kind of path to enlightenment, to finding this middle way. But if you read the deeper truth on the middle way is that the middle way is this existence itself. And this is in alignment, actually, with this sense of speed. If you speed it up too much or slow it down just a little bit, life doesn't come into existence. We are living the middle way just by the fact of our existence. We are already living the middle way. You don't have to worry about being saved. You are, right? Just by the fact that you're alive. Furthermore, when we see these galaxies as coming back into a singular point, if we go all the way back to that point, time doesn't exist. Time only exists in the light of being. If there's no being, there is no time. And so as the universe is expanding, time and being go together. The expansion rate and the matter, the physical matter of the universe, they go together. You can't have one without the other. There is no time separate from being in that regard. But what is our usual way of thinking? Our usual way of thinking is that Big Bang happened way back then. Right? Yeah, that thing happened. That was an event that happened back then. It doesn't really have an effect on my life today. But the reality is, what we're seeing is that the Big Bang is actually, we're inside of it. We're inside of it. But what our minds tend to do in modern Western experience is to say, we're outside of the Big Bang and it happened back then. Right? We've pulled ourselves out from the universe and as if we can observe it out there. It happened back then. But what I'm trying to suggest is that we're actually embedded inside of it. We never left it. It's happening right now. And in the same way, Dogen says this. And then he says, Reflect now whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. Right? Reflect now whether any being or any moment, any world is left out of the present moment. So everything from the beginning is present right now. Dinosaurs, supernovas, atoms, the evolution of species. This is all continuing to happen. We're not done. We're not done evolving. Can you see your spine related to other mammals? They're here too. They're inside of us. Without them, we wouldn't be. So, I'd like to, I think I'll maybe just end there and see where you guys are with this. Thank you.
I have a thought. I'm hearing the kind of Shavasavadan perspective, past, present, and future, all existing together. I've heard it like time is a flat circle, right? If you would zoom out of time, you would see the whole thing. They're all sort of connected, and that does have a sort of shifts the way you look at things. Is that sound what you're getting at?
Right, yeah, there's some, I think there is some kind of shift in perspective that's necessary here for us, for modern people, in terms of how we perceive of time. Yeah. It's more circular rather than linear. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it seems like it makes you less want to remove pieces of the story. Like, you're more likely to perceive things in sort of wholeness.
Exactly.
There's a lot of it we want to forget, or that we just, as a matter of habit, maybe forget.
Right, yeah. It's out of our consciousness. And then we do this other thing as well, where we don't see ourselves as connected or related to other species, for example, or even other, the elements of the natural world, the wind, the water. We don't see ourselves connected there because we've blocked that aspect of the self out. This is the consequence of that, this is the consequence of that kind of thinking.
I'll drop this. This is a little far out, but we're kind of in that space anyway, so I'll go ahead. There's a book, Ishmael, this fella has a conversation with a telepathic gorilla. It's silly, but one of the ideas that they introduced was that humans are simply the first species to develop self-awareness, and every other species is on that journey. It's not like they're going to arrive there. So like that's what the future holds, which is sort of similar to notice how the Diamond Sutra opens up. It's like all beings will eventually be led by me into the final complete. This is the sort of
Yeah, I think there's some compatibility there. Yeah. So that effect, if we were to see other species in that light as approaching Buddhahood just as humans, how would that affect our perception of them? I don't know.
Yeah, that is sort of radical. Like Kyle's gonna wake up one day and realize what you had done to him.
Yeah. But yeah, well, it has to do with our sense of entitlement and the way that we see the world as a kind of commodity to be used for gain, for our gain as a species. And what if, so this is pointing to a radical shift in perception. What if we were to see things a little bit differently? Everything is in, how do we engage in a world like that? Because right now, as we are living, it's very hard to engage in that, in this kind of world that has a sensitivity to the unique path of other species, right? How do we engage in that world from where we are right now? It's very, very challenge. It's a challenge. I'll just point. I haven't perfected that. I'm just pointing to the challenge of it. This is the challenge of Dogen. Like, how do we live in that particular world? If our present mindset is focused on seeing things as objects, do we live in a world? So Thomas Berry would say, do we live in a world of objects or a world of objects that are separate versus a world of subjects that are in communion with each other? There's a different sense, a different feeling towards the things that we are relating with, depending on our outlook. It affects the way we live. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So, early on, from my understanding, or what I've tried to understand, is that like everything is a being or is us, or I would try to meditate on things like everything used to be my mother in a previous lifetime. And I don't always do it, but just as a general rule, the floor, any kind of object, was my mother at one time and nursed me to health. It's like a very kind of different way, I guess, that's been like helpful for me.
Yeah.
To treat everything as a human or something, or as some type of being. And then with time, I don't know if I really understand what you're saying yet, but I could try. And so the Big Bang, we're inside of it, or it's inside of us.
Right, yeah.
That I can kind of understand that. So if we're inside of the Big Bang, then is it inside of us too? Because that would make sense.
Exactly.
The little Big Bang is
exactly.
like in our heart.
So the creative potential that we ascribe to the beginning of time is present right now, and is present also in us. What you do is creating the world. That's how powerful you are. Right? What you think is creating the world. We don't generally see it that way, though. We think, oh, I'm just a small guy. What I do doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying that that's a kind of an attitude that, it doesn't really matter what I do. It doesn't make any difference anyways. And Zen is saying something very different, saying what you do actually is creating the world right now. We're creating the world through our practice. Every moment we're creating the world, and that's for better or for worse. And Zen is just about, well, let's make, if we are going to take responsibility for creating the world, let's do it well. Right? We want to have, how do we use the thoughts that we have? Do we want to create positive thoughts, or do we want to slide into our usual habitual way of thinking about things? All right, how do we daydream? Where do our thoughts, where does our mind go when we're not focused in meditation? Can it go to perceiving a world that is loving, that is kind?
And Buddha said the same thing, right? With our thoughts and our actions, we create the world.
So
That's
right
the first
from the
verse
beginning.
of the Dhammapada.
First verse of the Dhammapada, right? The original words of the Buddha.
Yeah.
I don't think the Buddha had a concept of cosmogenesis, but the science is just really affirming I think, what he's saying. And we can align ourselves. Now, this is where we can start to align ourselves, like the power of our thoughts, the power of our words, the power of our action, and we can all improve. Absolutely. I mean, I know there's times I get into mental funks, and okay, well, that's where the practice comes in, and we start to work. There's a lot of things we can do to work with that through practice, but to continue to refine ourselves in thoughts, words, actions.
And then I think this, when you talk about the Big Bang and its expansion rate, I think that's how Einstein came up with the theory of relativity when he said, from this small thing, it can expand rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the whole thing.
Mm. Yeah.
That we can take this energy mass, uranium, and it will.
Right. So yeah. So if that's where our minds are with it, like I want to be better than somebody else, I want to take over somebody else's land, you can create a bomb, and it will do that, right? I mean, we could do that. That's a possibility. That's a real possibility. We have within our hands the ability to create the universe as well as destroy it. That's the. It could go either way, folks. So we don't, there's not like in Buddhism we don't have predestination. Although actually, I shouldn't say that, because there is this teaching that we're all destined to be Buddhas.
Yeah.
Right? So don't underestimate that either. Don't underestimate the power of goodness. I mean, it's gotten us this far. If you consider the vastness of the universe, it's gotten us this far. To think that we human beings are going to screw everything up is premature, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm totally lost. Dogen's inscrutable, but this Cosmogenesis thing, this is a tiny planet, and we're tiny people sitting in a tiny room in a tiny group. We don't make a single bit of difference. We can't destroy the universe. That's an overstatement. We can destroy civilization on this planet if we want to. That's about as much, and this planet doesn't matter to us, the overall context. I'm finding it really difficult to get from these cosmological, metaphysical speculations and Dogen's obscurity to what are we trying to do? How does this apply to daily practice that can actually be relevant to a pretty simple guy like me? I don't want to hear about atoms and bonds and just what are you trying to say in terms of what it means for now, in this room, in this day that gives us something approaching peace and content.
Stay there with that question. I'm not trying to teach anybody anything. This is your practice. Take some responsibility for it. Don't rely on me for your peace.
No, but I attend, I come, I listen, I make the effort, I sit, I do these things. But what I get is the cosmos, and today becoming yesterday, when yesterday is clearly done. There's nothing I can do today to change what happened yesterday. So maybe I just sit with it.
It's your question. Right, and that's okay. From my perspective, that's what it means to be a student. Keep curiosity there. Don't give up on your studies. If this doesn't speak to you, that's okay.
I've got maybe a thought about when I heard you say like today feeds into yesterday. I thought about how we think about memories of the past and how we can shift that of, okay, that event exists and that happened, but our thought about how it relates to us and what it means for us can change over time.
How it relates to us can change over time.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like,
so
you know,
how
something-
we relate to the
maybe
past.
we thought it was something bad that happened to us before, and you realize later on that that changed who you are.
There you go.
It's like-
Yes. That's a transformation right there. Yeah, a lot, and we see that with people all the time. Like, this bad thing happened to me, and then you start to practice, and you realize, wait a minute, that was the best thing that could ever happen, right?
You don't know at any time something happens to you. what
That's
it's
a
gonna be.
perfect example. The past, the present flows into the past. Yeah. Good.
Every step I took brought me here.
Sarah?
I'm also like, I understand, what Fergus is saying too, because like I kind of live in this space where I'm constantly like, I love listening to like quantum physicists talk about like space-time and, that doesn't mean I understand any of it, but like it's almost, and it's almost just like me reading, just because I'm curious about it and so mysterious, and that's why I'm interested and I like to like read books about it, but it's, to me, because we are so limited in the way we perceive what our experience is, it is like that metaphor of like three blind men like touching an elephant, of like space-time is like this, and like no, it's like this, because we can only process it and talk about it in a way that in itself is linear, because in a narrative, and put like this and this and this. So but in the way like where you kind of pull from that macro and like funnel it down into micro, into an individual experience, my whole relationship with time and like the present moment in particular has just everything to do with what you were talking about, like creation, because it's the more in tune in my experience that I'm able to like get present in the now, I feel like I have more agency over my life, because I understand that what I do in any given now, like if I get really grounded in that, then I understand what my sphere of control is. I understand my influence, my sphere of influence, and what I'm creating in my own life. But the kind of dysfunctional relationship I have with time too is also when I have this feeling of like there's not enough of it, which is a weird thing to say. Like,
Right,
because
yes.
I just started a new job and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and I feel like I have to, and I feel like I'm flying, I'm trying to get into this new routine and like a million things to do and like there's not enough time, and then I start to feel stressed out. And one of my tools in my toolkit is to get really grounded, even if it's just for like 3 minutes. It doesn't mean that the things that I have to do go away, but I am not in my head about it and I'm more in the present moment. So for me, that's one personal applicable use of like cosmic nowness. It's always just now, it's getting out of that mindset of like there's not enough time, which if you just take a beat, on its face, that phrase sounds a little silly. Like it's just now. Like there's just shit to do, and it's gonna get done. And like I'm just sitting here now, and just take a breath. Like I don't know.
I totally hear what you're saying though about not having enough time, right? And that, again, I'm often in that space. I mean, even before our zazen here, I was like rushing around upstairs getting my teeth done and thinking, I don't have enough time to brush my teeth. So it's endemic to the way that we think, right? This misunderstanding, the misalignment of time with being. That's what creates stress, right?
But you didn't have time to brush your teeth. So, maybe you did, but, so if there's this, hey, we can think about this a different way, how does it affect the practical moment of washing your teeth?
Yeah. Yeah, that's my koan.
Oh, I can.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I've been working with Uzi for a long time, trying to figure out like how to view it in a practical lens. And you can look at it in different ways. Like one way, like we're saying, typically we're looking at it through a scientific lens. Like there's me, and there's this universe. There's me, and there's time. I found that the best way for a practitioner to work with something like Uji is to just look at it through the lens of your own thoughts. Like, we're creating this universe, quote unquote. It's the universe not, I mean, there's a universe out there of some sort, but then there's this universe that we create through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, right? So that's the universe that, if for nothing else, we have control over. So we look at that this is the sphere we're working with. So we're saying all being is time. Our perceptions are set in time. And I think Dogen's just talking about impermanence in a sense. A really weird, zen-y, poetic way, but he's talking about impermanence because we often think that we are this unchanging essence that just kind of floats around everywhere. But Dogen's saying what we are, quote unquote, is not an unchanging essence. What we are is change, is impermanence, is time. That defines us, like actual just change. And for me, this was big because when I was in the factory, of course, I was back to the factory, like, I'm stuck and nothing's changing. Every day's the same. I'm like, I wake up, it's the exact same goddamn thing every single day, and I'm going crazy. But it's not like every single day it's always changing. It's always changing, even though our routine's exactly the same. Routine's in our mind. A routine is something that we make up, right? We can write it down on a page, and we can go out and we do our routine. But in that routine, it's different every single time. We see with our mind the things that look the same, like, okay, it's going to be 8 a.m., the alarm's going to go off. 9 p.m., I'm going to go into the office. 10 p.m., that guy's going to come in and say the exact same thing he's been saying every day for 3 years. He still thinks it's funny, but it's not. And then at noon, I get to leave the office for a second and get some food. I'm going to eat the same thing. That's what I do. I eat the same thing every day. And then at 5 o'clock, maybe I get to go, but then someone's going to come in and be like, you've got more work to do. I'm really going to leave at like 7 or 6 or 7:30, something like that. But
So how's Uji practical for you?
I mean, it looks like it's the same dang thing, but it's when you really just are there in that moment, though that sameness falls away. And it's hard to describe it because it's the actual just lived experience. But it's like when you look at the wall, right? We're looking at the same stupid wall. I do. They're there every single day, but every single time I sit down on the wall, it's different. Even the wall's not the same theoretically because all molecules are going, but we're talking about from this perspective. Different stuff's always coming up. And then you also have the ability at every single moment to change any relationship you have with those people. People are going to be very resistant probably, but some people aren't going to be resistant. Some people are like, whoa, who is this new person you are? That happens sometimes. So it's really a change in the idea of perspective of how you relate to everything around you. So for me, like at the factory, I just realized, I could leave at any time. I could just quit. I could go live in a monastery. And I did finally, but I realized this, things seem like they're the same. I'm going crazy. I'm not treating people well. But now then I changed it and turned it into an opportunity to kind of bring this freshness that I was trying to live to every reaction that I have with everybody around me. That's the Bodhisattva idea. So you just bring yourself into this very present moment because there's no guidelines for how to act really because everything's changing. There's no set guidelines that you have to follow with any interaction with people or systems or anything really. You can really just bring what it is that you are, this constantly developing, I'll say system, but even pieces of the system are also impermanent and always changing. You have the ability at any moment, at everything, you can do nothing but change because that's what we are. Like to think that we're the same, like that, you have to put active effort into thinking that you're the same. Like that's, right?
But in the trajectory of time, as we traditionally understand it, is past, is present, and future. And like one thing Buddhism teaches is, and you know what, is all going to change, and it's all going to change in tiny ways, and it's going to change in dramatic ways, and it's all going to change with all the purpose. That's fine. That's a traditional understanding that can help you moment to moment, right? To understand that everything is impermanent towards right action. How do you tie that back to Uji and Cosmogenesis and yesterday is today and today?
Oh, yesterday.
That's where
Yeah.
I'm getting disconnected here.
It's our, I wouldn't really say you have to think about it as like, yesterday is this thing that's outside of you. Like the decisions you made yesterday are still alive right here, right? Like you had breakfast, like you literally, this thing had breakfast yesterday. Or it's available in many different ways. Like the words that your parents said to you when you were a kid, those are all still alive in you right now. This building was not made today. This building is still here. This is an inheritance from the past. Like literally the entire universe is an inheritance that we never asked for. I don't know if we even are, you know.
Your Irish inheritance is certainly part of your present moment.
So,
You can't be separate, you're not separate
not
from it.
separate. It makes me what I am. I think. So you've had all this past stuff, right? That you can't change because it's past, and you now dealing with it in the present moment, and it will impact aspects of what happens in the future. To me, is very practical daily advice in terms of how we try to ground ourselves in a moment, as Sarah said, and capture it. The cosmology stuff is kind of just not.
Well, I guess
connecting for me to that.
Sure, my point, I guess, in bringing this up, the cosmology, is that I'm coming from the assumption that we are lacking a story in which to guide our lives by, right? So we have, in Western philosophy and theology, we have a story that's dysfunctional. We have a story that says life was created by God certain number of years ago, and it took place in a week time. That's a narrative story, and it had power at one time in human history. But for the most part, unless you look at that story much more symbolically, it has lost its power for most people, and we've lost the narrative of where we understand who we are and our place in the universe, right? So introducing an idea of cosmogenesis is introducing us to what some have called the universe story, that there is a new story emerging in our time that is based in scientific understandings and discoveries of the universe and how it came to be. So the idea of telling this cosmogenesis in terms of the universe is expanding at a certain rate, not too fast, not too slow, it's to help us to see that we're part of something much greater than ourselves. We're not separate from this entire world around us in a story format, but that's rooted in our present understandings of the universe, which is different from the way most of Western people have come to understand the world, right? That there's this kind of sharp dichotomy between God and the world, creator and created, time and creation take place back then versus an ongoing process. Those are very different ways of thinking about the world, but they're rooted in story. And we don't have a strong sense of story right now. We don't have a sense of story of how we came about and where we're going in a mythological form. So, but what I am suggesting is that a new story, and it's not just coming from me, this is coming from my own teachers, not Buddhist, by the way, but that a new story is emerging that we can connect to if we choose. I mean, there's other stories as well that might be powerful, but we need a story. Uji is very philosophical, and it's hard. It's very hard to get behind because of the high philosophy. It's much easier to tell a story. It's much easier to tell a story, and that's what if you think about the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu story, what the Indians, the Hindus have been a genius at is putting these high philosophical thoughts of Atman and Brahman and
Arjuna.
Arjuna, yeah, put it in the form of a story that people can, like ordinary people can understand and get behind. So we're lacking that mostly in modern times. And so this idea, these kind of scientific ideas are providing a kind of story. So I just suggest to anybody here, if you want to learn more about it, there's a wonderful video that some of my teachers put out called "The Journey of the Universe," and it can be a helpful way to reorient and see ourselves as part of a larger cosmological process. And it's attempting to do that in story form, not to limit us to just that particular story, but to say that we need story, we need narrative.
And even, I could even take that and distill it down to a practical individual use, in that if you are kind of like orienting yourself like within that, like a cosmic, and you're talking about space-time fabric and all of that, like it's again, like it's interesting because it's so mysterious to me, but it also for me serves to like right-size my problems.
Yeah.
And the better able I am to shift back and forth from this like cosmic perspective down to my individual perspective is really useful to me because it's adaptive.
Yeah.
And it's not to like, when I shift out and go big, it's not to diminish my problems in my life, but it is a way to be like, okay, this is happening in this huge space-time continuum, and like, is it still important? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, it is still important, but it's maybe not as big of a deal as I thought it was, but I still do have to, it's...
So the science, the physics, quantum theory, all of this stuff is going to speak to some people, it's not going to speak to everybody. And I'm sorry if it doesn't speak to everybody. But I will say, again, coming back to the idea of story, as a chaplain working in a hospital, working with a lot of folks that are 70s, 80s, they resonate with a story of Jesus. I can go into the Gospels and talk about Jesus, and they're right with me and they feel better because they can connect with a person, they can connect with the flow of a story. I can talk about Jesus dying on the cross and experiencing pain and how that connects with their pain in that moment because they buy into that particular narrative. Narrative is powerful. If you don't buy into that narrative, though, where are you? Where does that leave you? We desire having a narrative to connect with, to feel that we're part of something bigger. Right? I guess that's one of my points. And we can also look at the story of the Buddha as well, as a narrative to connect to. When we see the Buddha did this, 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 and this, oh, okay, I can connect with that. Okay. But these are all limited narratives, and they don't speak to everybody. So do your homework. Keep studying.
Maybe it speaks, maybe that's the cross purpose. Modernity is defined by what was discovered in the 1920s and 1930s. I've never doubted it for one instant, that science, and as I learned more about Zen Buddhism, how it anticipated a huge amount of quantum science at a time when this could never have been known. So that sort of grand arc of scientific history is normal to me.
Yeah.
I rejected Christian orthodoxy on that particular set of stories when I was a very young boy because it didn't make any sense to me. It was a limited narrative. So it's just what you're saying is Uji is basically saying, look, there's a cosmic timeline here, and we just need to be aware that this is a massively changing and expanding universe, and that's all it really matters for. It's all impermanent, it's all changing.
Well, yes and no. I'll give you another story. I mean, here I work with somebody who's considers himself atheist, maybe agnostic in the hospital. He has he has limited mobility. And when I talk to him about, the atoms in your body go back to the Big Bang, he lights up. So there's a sense like there's an ignition that takes place there. And that's what I think that we desire is like an ignition. We need to be ignited by something that moves us spiritually to experience the joy of living. If there's not joy in it, it's what's.
Maybe this is an oversimplification, but I mean, since moving here, and as you're saying, what brought us here? Well, a divorce brought me here. But I'm not complaining. Now I'm sitting, almost every morning I get to watch the squirrels in my backyard. It's a very simple life. And honestly, which one of us is more intellectually astute? The squirrels that get up in the trees and argue with each other, then go looking for their food? Or me, who spent a lifetime chasing titles and now retired twice, and it's like, what was the point of chasing all of those titles? What was the point of chasing the money? That money never really brought happiness. And that's where even in our conversation this morning, part of when you look at what's my little minute piece in this vast thing that's taking place, well, even the simple fact of putting some almonds out for my squirrels in the backyard, they were going to find food one way or the other. All I did was take an opportunity to contribute to that in some small factor. But as we're talking, and it's like, even the smallest in an old watch, if the smallest gear broke, the entire watch stops. So, I mean, you can look at this big or small, but the fact remains, whatever little thing we do, it does affect things that we may not even begin to realize it's affecting.
Exactly.
So when you're looking at a time and space thing, I'm maybe one of the few people that actually likes reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but it also then allows me to sit there and contemplate the fact that there's the unseen.
Yes.
So it's not just simply the universe, physical universe I see around me, because I've had friends that have had the conversation of, well, what about that which you see out of the corner of your eye, that when you go to look at it directly isn't there? And, I go back to the point that in one of the sutras, Buddha is talking, and then bodhisattvas from other planes of existence come, because this is going to be the talk of all talks. And then at some point Amitabha shows up, and they're like, but it was the point of realize that there's far more actually going on than what you see right here. And if you're open to realize that there's far more going on, even though you don't see it, there's a lot more humility about your own existence.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your sharing and comments and thoughts. We're just keep turning the Dharma wheel. Thank you guys online too. Thank you.
You lose George. So I had a little bit of announcements to
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
We could do that, and I guess we could close the sutras after that.
George is back.
See that?
Yep.
Let's have him close it out for the official.
You're on stage, George.
Yeah, waiting for you, are you?
We are.
We're gonna do a simple echo and then the 4 vows, which is on page 2. Close.
Sorry.
May this earth and universally to all, we with all living beings realize the real way.
let's do the announcements. Yeah, I'll do it real quick. Let's see, I had
Announcement time. Thank you guys online. Thanks so much for wrestling with us this morning.
so.
Feel free to stick around for the announcements or not.
Yeah. Oh, Sajiki Ghost Festival will be next Sunday. I'll talk about the specifics of it, but one thing to do is to bring something to make a lot of noise with, pots, pans,
Neon horns.
kazoos, alpenhorn.
I'm sorry, this coming Sunday, a week from today?
And then also names of people you would like to have remembered during the service as well. It could be someone who's passed in a recent year, it could be somebody who's passed 10 years ago, I won't say 100 years ago, but someone that's directly related with your life. So just the noise and all of this like ties into the mythology, but it also could be viewed as being somewhat cathartic as well, because there's, I don't know how many times we get to just be in a group and just lament out loud, I would bring that type of mind to it. Or if it's just something to, if it's just a general sense of anxiety you want to help to bring up and just, we'll progress through the Zendo 3 times, and it'll be 3 waves of sound that we'll do. And then the mythological explanation is that we're letting the hungry ghosts in, but the hungry ghosts are, some type of emotional bond that just keeps unskillful, most likely. It keeps coming back. So we're acknowledging its presence, we're holding it for a moment in the group, and then we're letting it go. So that's kind of how what this ceremony is really about. We also bring food that we think these people would like, and we place it on the altar, and then we get to eat the food afterwards. So it's tying in with this whole thing of the past. We're bringing the past to life. We're bringing these old things that we're doing unskillfully into the present moment right now, and then I'm not necessarily dealing with them, but acknowledging them, shaking this body and mind loose a little bit. So, but it'll be fun too. There will be a lecture, so it'll be like a regular Dharma talk as well about
And when's this happening?
Sunday.
Next Sunday, okay.
So bring a dish. Potluck.
What time?
Just a sweet treat of some sort, candy, donuts,
Okay.
a pie, some piece of pie, something simple that someone from your past would like, someone you're trying to remember. It's a day of remembrance.
So at the same time as Open Zen?
We'll sit for a half hour and then we'll do
Okay,
and
understood.
We'll do the ceremony after that. It's an old ceremony. I've done a very limited version of this on my own with some old friends of mine that had passed, and I put their name on the altar and I just ate incense, and I did the Heart Sutra and ate the food afterwards. So it's very simple, but this will be more, since we have so many people, we'll be able to do it much more traditionally. And for me, it was it was one of my old friends that had passed unexpectedly, and I didn't really, for years, didn't properly, I don't think, dealt with the karma of that situation. So it was really, you're going to do this whole ceremony. You have to really, you're going to go out and you're going to buy the food. You're like, what would they like? You're going to put their name on the altar, so you're thinking about it. You really have to bring this to life. So if it's going to be too much for some people, you can always duck out on it, but it's really, it's powerful. It can be powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Something like this.
Thank you.
Let me see, so that, Sajiki, there's a sesshin coming up.
In December.
Do you know the dates? I didn't write this up.
I think it's the 4th through the 8th, somewhere around there. That's December. So yeah, think about that if you want to do any part of that session.
Is that Rohatsu?
Rohatsu session, yeah.
Oh, that is Rohatsu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next month, when I'm here at least, we'll do an intro to Zen.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Intro to Zen.
Intro to Zen in November. And even if you, are clear about what Zen is about and practice, still, I encourage people to come if you can, even if just to help out with the event, if you'd like to. Yeah.
see, there's our practice schedule in temple and online, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7:15-ish, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 to 6, and so those are the early days. Wednesday nights, 6 to 7:30, we do a sit in person and online, and then we have our Sundays right here, 10 to noon or so, but the last Sunday of the month, from 9:30 to 11:30 or so. And then we have a couple of things that we said that were coming up. And then there's the Dharma, 4 ways to contribute, and that's how this whole place is together. That's why I'm able to be here, from everybody's generosity.
And mine as well, yeah.
Yeah, what you give comes back to us, and it gives back, and it just that like they say, there's no giver, no receiver, no gift. There is, but we're talking about our way that we interact with the gift. So the gift that we give to this temple comes back to us, and it comes back to everybody. Even people beyond the Sangha goes out. So I'm out in the community talking to other groups. I haven't done it too much recently, but there's another a church I'm probably going to try to visit. And I'm out preaching the Dharma fairly regularly everywhere, and like all the contributions that everybody makes make that possible. There's a QR code out in the hall. It's a recurring membership that you can take part in. There's just a Dharma bowl out there for spare cash or checks, and there's a 4th one I don't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I always say that the Dharma too doesn't have to be money. We practice Dharma every day that we stop and we listen to somebody that needs to be listened to, or even just be nice on the road, or that we don't get angry at ourselves, or we don't get angry when we see the red light coming up. That's a big one for me. We just, red light, this is what's happening right now. It's all Dharma. So that's it for
All right.
announcements.